driveway to an allotment, a wind turbine, and a ground-sourced heat exchange. Consequently, houses, flats, apartments, condos, and housing developments might end up taking considerably more space. What if, between peak oil, by which I generally mean the high cost of fossil fuels and the low availability of them, and carbon concerns, international jet transport and even shipping becomes highly curtailed and rationed, and also much more expensive, considerably heightening the transport cost of food. Related factors include heightened costs of fertilizers and embedded water accounting. This could potentially raise the value of local agricultural activities, amplifying number one above, and it could also reinforce individuals' drives to self-sufficiency, amplifying number two above. What if the human-machine interface becomes more permeable and people commonly use bioengineering to optimize human performance? This produces a potential for entirely new sets of hardwired human values and points of view. In California at Singularity University, the students and faculty forecast the imminent, within 50 years, creation by technology of artificial, greater-than-human intelligence. These AIs may have completely alien points of view and value sets, and also may be very powerful actors in decision-making and resource allocation. What will be their role in market activities, if any? Just think about that unexplained stock market dip back in April that is due perhaps to competing stock software. So, challenging assumptions. As part of exploring emerging change, I also collect people's images and ideas about what futures are possible. Images, pictures, stories from our imagination are all important. Dream it, then do it. What we imagine can drive what we do and what we create as a result. And Professor Neo from Singapore was characterizing some of Singapore's success as due to exactly that. In fact, carrying on with Singapore as an example, take Thesis.x, an exhibition by graduating architecture students at the National University of Singapore that's going on right now. The main theme of that exhibit is a rethinking of the way cities function today in light of urbanization over the past century and its detrimental effect on our planet, which has resulted in rising sea levels, food and housing shortages, excessive consumer waste, and rising demands for energy. So those students have set themselves the challenge of rethinking how cities are designed and how they as architecture students can contribute to that. So this gives me a bridge to the fact that many forecasts and many related images of the future today arise from the fact that our current assumptions and our current ways of working are slamming us up against limits across a wide variety of systems. This table represents a collection of paths to the end of the world as we know it. That doesn't necessarily mean a collapse, of course. It can just mean a completely transformational change of perspective and paradigm, a transformation in all our systems, in how we do things. There are a number of people who've been exploring images of the future of cities. In some of the projects that were mentioned in my introduction for the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, for Natural England, for the UK Foresight Program, we've done exactly that. Oxford University's Institute for Science, Innovation and Society has just completed a set of 3 scenarios on the future of cities. So a lot of people have been thinking about possible alternative futures for cities. In the last half of my presentation, I want to quickly bundle some emerging issues of change into 3 stories about what we may see in the future. 3 different possible ways the world we know it, business as usual, could come to an end. The 3 I will discuss from this table are the transform possibility, the fade possible future, and the sustain future. Now, 20 years ago, I and my colleagues in future studies would talk about transformational high technology futures. And many people would laugh and say, that seems like outlandish science fiction. Now, in many ways, this is the future that South Korea's digital economy and industrial innovation is creating for itself and for the rest of the world. It is the dream society, the experience society, where bandwidth has multiplied so much that it has also multiplied the hunger for content. It is the future that Singularity University in California teaches as a given to aspiring entrepreneurs and business innovators. It is a future, and I will point out that I am not going to read out this long description of the transform scenario. It is available here, and these slides will be available on SlideShare online for those of you who are interested. It is the future that Singularity University in California teaches as a given to aspiring entrepreneurs and business innovators. It is a future of digital worlds, of digital identities, of embedded electronics and brain-machine interfaces. These are all current innovations and being currently tested in a number of people. It is a future of advanced biochemical tinkering with the human mind and musculature, all of which could significantly change human performance and potentially what our definition of human is. Most of these innovations take a lot of intensely centralized and well-supported innovation and R&D infrastructure and funding of the way that many of the previous speakers were describing in terms of creating national, industrial, or city competitiveness. This human transformation will be further amplified by the evolving intelligence of our surroundings in terms of the mind-reading robots that are the goal of a joint Japanese government and private partnership, and the robotic automobiles that the DARPA Grand Challenge has been encouraging over the past several years. When coupled with smart roads, the individual transport of the transform high-tech future may look more like a mobile, autopiloted living room or office, as one designer has suggested, that may flock with other automatic cars to form road trains. Of course, by 2018, the internet will have 1 million times as many nodes as the human brain, and it will have senses, courtesy of the cameras and microphones and compasses and accelerometers and toxin and particulate sniffers that we can add to our iPhones. Not to mention the fact that Hewlett-Packard is building an ambitious planet-wide sensor network that they call SENSE as an infrastructure, as a backbone for exactly this global sensory system. This combination of a very complex internet tied to sensing systems, some people are suggesting could result in artificial intelligence by evolution rather than by explicit design. Finally, to really push the boundaries of the high-tech, always-on, AI autopilot singularity world, consumerism could reach its apotheosis with the widespread availability of what's called home fabbing or fabrication, the ability to print anything from furniture to food at home. That could really push us up against resource limits. And it would take care of the landfill problem, though, since presumably you could feed your obsolete gadgets into your fabber, and it could use them as raw materials to make your new set of gadgets. But let's think about system limits and move on to the future cities that may be foreshadowing the path of other urban areas. Let's think about the fade future and aging cities, both aging in terms of their population and aging in terms of their infrastructure, industrial systems, and economy. Patrick McGilleran, a Milwaukee journalist, recently asked the question, how comprehensively wrecked is Detroit? This wrecked. The city has finally scraped up enough money to rip down 3,000 abandoned buildings this summer. But that's just a small start, because Detroit has about 90,000 abandoned and vacant buildings. About 30% of the city's housing is vacant. Neighborhoods with vacancy rates of only 20% are considered really stable. And not only are live people of all ethnicities now fleeing the city, dead people are too, as relatives are disinterring loved ones from city cemeteries for reburial in some other place not quite so doomed. The government is looking at expanding a pioneering scheme in Flint, Michigan, one of the poorest U.S. cities, which involves flattening entire districts and returning the land to nature. Dan Kildee, a local civil servant, believes the city must contract by as much as 40%, concentrating the dwindling population and local services into a more viable area. Having outlined his strategy to Barack Obama during the election campaign, Mr. Kildee has now been approached by the U.S. government and a group of charities who want him to apply what he has learned to the rest of the country. Mr. Kildee has said he will concentrate on 50 cities, mostly in the U.S. Rust Belt, as potentially needing to shrink substantially to cope with their declining fortunes. Those cities include Detroit, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Memphis, among others. So, in some future contexts, being competitive may mean shrinking. Creative and humorous suggestions as to how fading, sprawling, middle-class suburbs might be re-envisioned and recycled to recreate themselves economically and environmentally were offered by designers in Inhabitat and Dwell. Those are two online architecture design blogs. Were offered by designers in Inhabitat Dwell's Reburbia design contest. Ideas included using airships to create more coherent mass transit systems in sprawling, fading conurbations, building new housing above the roadways in between the existing suburban fabric, recycling out-of-business big box stores like IKEA into urban and suburban greenhouses, abolishing zoning laws to create a community of entrepreneurs who transform inefficient single-family dwellings and purely decorative landscape spaces into intelligent home-based businesses, or transforming vacant McMansions at the edge of cities into living machines, that is, micro-wetland ecosystems that purify water and support wetland wildlife. And of course, even if we do nothing to recycle our decaying urban environments, nature will happily do the job for us. And since I've used Singapore for so many wonderful examples previously, I will point out that this is from downtown Singapore, and I took this picture a year ago, which gives us a reason to think about an alternative. Please, let's go from coping with fade to evolving sustain. I use the phrase parsimonious cities because parsimony, a design ethic and aesthetic that gets the maximum benefit from the minimum input, is both an elegant and a competitive attitude. It makes good sense, no matter what side of the global climate change debate you follow. It is nature's own design aesthetic. Sustain, as an image of the future for cities, is currently enjoying a boom in adherence. Eco-city initiatives, transition towns, metropolitan agriculture research groups are connecting globally to discuss strategies. Some involve a focus on designing green homes or recycling resources, like this example of a shipping container apartment complex, which actually exists in Amsterdam, to address inequities in housing availability. Many attempt to incorporate the idea of ecosystem services, which is a concept that suggests internalizing the economic value of the support services the local ecosystem provides to human communities and their economies. But for just 3 assumption-busting changes, let us look briefly at transformations in food production, in the blurring boundaries between the urban and the rural, and in decentralized energy generation. Food production may increasingly minimize both the soil used and the water used, as advocates of aeroponics, raising crops in nutrient mists, suggest. 2 MIT graduate students have created a design concept for something called a food printer, using raw ingredients to layer up foods and dishes and create anything you want. And PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, has offered a $1 million X Prize competition for the first team to develop commercially successful in vitro meat production. Blur is a key concept for the future. The transform scenario suggested a blurring between human and machine. Sustain suggests blurring boundaries between the natural and the built environment, with ideas like pook tree or arbor sculpture of city amenities like playgrounds, and also blurring the boundaries between the rural and the urban with notions of vertical farming and vertical ecologies, or the notions between blurring the concepts of the wild and the farmed with ideas like perennial agriculture being developed by the Land Institute. Of course, as many people have mentioned, one of the great challenges we face is peak oil in transforming our energy infrastructure. It fascinates me that both innovators and designers more and more, as I track interesting innovations occurring either in universities or in industries or in back sheds in Silicon Valley, that innovators and designers more and more are building the capacity for energy generation, often at very micro scales indeed, into almost everything. The computer industry talks about ubiquitous computing and embedding microprocessors in everything. Designers are heading us towards a future of ubiquitous energy generation. Small-scale solar rechargers, piezoelectric floors. There's a dance club in Germany where the lights run off of energy that is created as dancers jump up and down and gyrate on the piezoelectric club floor. Piezoelectric floors and surfaces that generate electricity via the pressure of movement, nickel-sized nuclear batteries, audacious schemes for solar roadways and railways, desalination innovations that simultaneously purify water and generate electricity, and advances in renewable energy storage that mimic photosynthesis and finally provide us with a way of storing excess energy generated by both solar and wind power, and storing it as hydrogen, which contributes to the ramping up of the hydrogen fuel economy. Sustain is essentially a biomimetic future. Biomimicry is an emerging scientific research paradigm that borrows from nature's rules for design. Janine Benyus wrote the book and the case studies that first described this research paradigm. And in it, she details examples and offers a list of those design rules. Nature. Nature suggests run on sunlight, use only the energy you need, fit form to function, recycle everything, reward cooperation, bank on diversity, demand local expertise, Gee, this is beginning to sound like that last slide of Professor Nee's, don't you think? Bank on diversity, demand local expertise, curb excess from within, and tap the power of limits. Are these rules of the game for robust competitive strategies? What would cities look like if they were planned by these rules? And to further challenge our assumptions about economic competitiveness, one last set of ideas about economic models which themselves are changing. Communities and regions are experimenting with their own local currencies. Investment is decentralizing from power brokers in the city and bankers to the crowd over the internet. And community ownership schemes are eroding private property concepts for some commodities. So, what economic paradigm are you planning to compete within? Will your city be competitive in the future? Answer that by considering how it might compete in any of these possible futures. Remember that you can leverage some of these emerging patterns of transformation. Printing practically anything, printing almost everything. Nets of everything, from the Internet of Things to a sensor net of things to a power net of things. Blur, where we often find the most interesting innovations that create new markets and redefine aspirations, are at the boundaries where two different demands, sets of needs, user aspirations meet, where two different scientific disciplines collide to create biochemistry, to create nano-biosynthetic life. Economies of grid rather than economies of scale. The home as a microstate, individuals becoming more self-sufficient. And biomimicry and parsimony as design aesthetics. How are you and your city prepared to support a culture of creativity, challenge, innovation, collaboration, and entrepreneurship across all of these shifting paradigms? And remember, surprises. How would your city have fared had, wait for it, Eyjafjallajökull set off Katla, its larger sister volcano, and both of them erupted for 2 years straight, which was one of the original forecasts when that volcano started spewing ash over Europe and shut down European airspace. Consider the potential disruptions to global air traffic. In conclusion, am I within time, Mr. Chairman? Yes, I must be. Okay. In conclusion, none of these images are predictions. They are forecasts. They are explorations based on actual innovations that I have been tracking. They explore possibilities emerging from those innovations and from design ideas in the present. I have wanted to shift in this slot at the end of the day from thinking about statistics, no matter how valuable to our planning, to thinking about design and creativity. In the end, the future our actions create will be framed by how we answer 5 basic questions. What new concepts, ideas, and paradigms will emerge to help us make sense of the world? How will we define ourselves in the world? How will we live together on planet Earth? How will we relate to each other? How will we collaborate rather than compete? What arts and technologies, what new languages will we use to connect people, places, and things? As human beings, what will we be inspired to create? And in the end, how will we use the Earth's resources? To answer, observe emerging change, explore its evolving implications, and challenge your own assumptions. I would like to say thank you to all of you for listening. I would especially like to say thank you to the organizers of this forum and in case they haven't been thanked yet, the translators and the IT and audiovisual people who helped me get my Macintosh system working in a Windows environment. So thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schultz, for your insightful and stimulating presentation. And I think two presentation is very, very interesting in a sense that one is very quantitative research and the other one is qualitative research. And in case of Dr. Pengfei, he devoted his research on the urban competitiveness index. In my experience, it's very, very difficult, a very challenging job, like a beauty contest. It's not easy to rank the city competitiveness. And on the other hand, Dr. Schultz came up with many fantastic ideas about the future of cities, but it's beyond our imagination. It's very, very intriguing, very intriguing. I'm very much impressed. And I think there is very much controversial issues to discuss. So it's the right time to entertain discussions. To start with, I think the President of Seoul Development Institute, Dr. CHEONG, will you make comments, or if you like, stay on, or if you don't like, stay. It's your option. You can stay, or you can make use of the rostrum.
네, 시정개발연구원 정문근입니다. 오늘 팽페이 교수님과 또 슐츠 교수님의 프레젠테이션을 잘 들었습니다. 우선 저는 팽페이 교수님의 도시 경쟁력에 대한 평가에 대해서 잠시 말씀을 드리고, 또 우리 슐츠 교수님의 미래의 변화에 맞춰서 서울이 어떤 준비를 하고 있느냐에 대해서 말씀을 드리고자 합니다. 여러분도 잘 아시다시피 저도 지금 모든 지금 세계적으로 이루어지고 있는 소위 평가기관의 평가는 저는 더 이상 믿지 않습니다. 우리가 외환위기를 거치고 또 금융위기를 거치면서 그동안 긴가민가 서로 의문을 가지고 있던 사실이 확실해진 게 한 가지 있습니다. 그게 뭔가 하면 여러분도 잘 아시겠습니다만 미국식 금융자본주의는 더 이상 서스테이너블, 지속 가능하지 않다는 사실입니다. 엄청난 버블을 유발하고 세계적인 소위 케이오스를 유발하는 시스템이 미국식 금융자본주의다. 또 여러분 잘 아시겠습니다. 미국식 금융자본주의를 구성하고 있는 대표적인 인스티튜션이 신용평가기관이었습니다. 그 신용평가기관들의 신용평가가 외환위기, 최근에 금융위기를 겪으면서 완전히 엉터리다. 신용평가기관을 평가해야 된다는 이야기가 나온 걸 여러분 잘 알고 계실 겁니다. 예를 들어서 말씀을 드리자면 지금 남유럽의 국가 신용 등급보다 왜 대한민국의 신용 등급이 낮아야 되느냐? 저는 그게 동의할 수가 없었죠. 저는 이 도시에 대한 경쟁력 평가도 마찬가지라 생각합니다. 그동안 서울의 도시 경쟁력 평가를 하는 평가기관, 특히 서양의 평가기관들의 평가를 보면 서울이 10위 안에 든 적이 없습니다. 항상 10위권, 20위권. 그래서 어떤 때는 또 보면 그냥 한 34개국 그 대상 도시들 중에 항상 또 하위권으로 평가를 했는데, 오늘 팽페이 교수님, 특히 중국 사회과학원에서 평가한 서울의 도시 경쟁력이 9위가 나왔고 또 어떤 한 부분에는 7위까지 나왔어요. 저는 그런 측면에서 이 중국 사회과학원의 도시 평가가 동양의 눈으로 봐서 평가를 해서 그런지 가장 도시 평가 기관 중에 객관적인 평가가 아니냐, 저는 그렇게 한번 생각을 해봤습니다. 자, 그렇지만은 하나 앞으로 그런 측면에서 앞으로 서양뿐만 아니라 동양에서도 이런 시각을 달리하는 평가가 이루어져 가지고 좀 더 객관성이 더 보강되어야 된다, 저는 그렇게 생각하고, 그런 취지에서 이번에 중국 사회과학원의 평가는 의미가 있다, 저는 이제 그렇게 생각을 합니다. 그 내용을 봐도 정성적인 지표보다는 정량적인 지표를 가지고 평가하는 노력이 돋보였다고 보여집니다. 그리고 이 슐츠 교수님의 여러 가지 이제 그동안 앞으로 미래의 사회, 미래의 도시의 상을 그려주셨습니다. 네 가지 단어로 요약이 되겠는데요. 미래의 도시가 경쟁력을 가지기 위해서는 챌린징 해야 되고 courageous 해야 된다. 그러면 도전에 용감하게 맞서야 된다 하는 그런 이제 메시지가 있는 것 같고요. 두 번째는 이렇게 복잡한 과학의 융합에 따라서 창조적인 어떤 이노베이션을 일으켜야 도시의 경쟁력을 유지할 수 있다, 이렇게 말씀을 드릴 수가 있을 것 같습니다. 그러면 이런 취지에서 지금 서울은 앞으로 서울이 도시 경쟁력을 가지기 위해서 이런 측면에서 어떤 노력을 하고 있는가 하는 걸 여러분들한테 말씀을 드리는 걸로 제 코멘트를 대신하도록 하겠습니다. 우선 서울이 어떤 면에서 어떤 도전에 직면해 있고 어떤 면에서 더 과감하고 용기 있게 앞으로 나아가야 할 부분이 어떤 부분이 있느냐를 생각해 보면, 서울의 광역화에 어떻게 대처할 것이냐 하는데 서울이 좀 더 용기 있게 과감하게 나가야 된다 생각을 합니다. 여러분 잘 아시다시피 서울의 수도로서의 기능은 이제 이미 행정구역을 넘쳐 흘렀습니다. 이제 서울의 행정구역만 생각을 해서는 서울이 수도로서의 경쟁력을 유지할 수 없는 지금 상황에 오늘날의 현 주소가 아닌가 생각을 합니다. 그런 측면에서 앞으로 서울은 두 가지 측면에서 앞으로 정책을 펴나가야 된다 생각합니다. 첫 번째가 서울은 이제 폐쇄된 내륙 도시가 아니라 개방된 해양 도시로 나아가야 된다 생각을 합니다. 그런 측면에서 이 서울이 동북아의 중심 도시로서의 아까 말씀드린 커넥티비티를 더 강화하기 위해서는 투 에어포트, 투 시포트 시스템을 더 강으로 확장해 나가야 된다. 자, 그러면 우리 공항을 보면 여러분 잘 아시다시피 인천공항은 대륙간 연계 공항으로서의 트랜짓 공항으로서 이미 국제 경쟁력을 가지고 있습니다. 그러면 지금 이제 인천공항의 보상으로서 그동안